was a riff from Art and Hard Times by singer-songwriter Bob Goldstein. Bob's an accomplished singer and songwriter. He's played everywhere from the streets of San Francisco to the Greek Theater. He was an opening act for such acts as Stephen Stills, America, Tom Waits, Air Supply, Jerry Garcia. I got to read because there's so many of them. He also had a deal with 20th Century Fox to write some screenplays, which he's done, accomplished screenwriter. And his third career, I guess you'd say, was as a technology CEO. So, Bob, you've done everything. Let's start out with Chicago, where you grew up.
Right.
Did you start music then? Because music's been your lifelong, really.
Right. Yeah, the one thing that's gone throughout my whole life is music. And growing up in Chicago, I was very lucky because there was a real serious music scene from the time I was 15 years old, really.
Right.
I started playing, and I started writing my first song at 15. And that was the days of the early folk scene, you know, and people like me and all my friends played music, so it was the thing to do. And the minute that you could write a song and stand up and play in front of people, we were out playing gigs.
But
so,
your family said, musician, what is this? Go to business school, or
exactly. Yeah, be a lawyer. That was the thing. But they were very good about it, and they enjoyed it. The good news was they enjoyed it. And you know, in those days, everyone would come over to my house and we'd play music, and so it was a lot of fun. And then you know that continued through high school, and then I was in all the musicals in high school, and I continued to play music in high school. So that was always my anchor. That was the thing I always went to.
But you still majored in business in college, and it was like, okay.
Yeah, I majored in business and minored in film. I went to SC, and all the time I was always playing music. But you know, I got involved in going to school, and that kind of took priority.
Yeah.
But then a good friend of mine, I was going to Indiana University, and a good friend of mine talked me into coming to USC for my last 2 years, and then I got involved in the film school, and that was a life-changing experience for a lot of reasons.
So you did some music for the film business?
Yes, I did some music for student films, and I acted in some student films. And the thing that was exciting about being in LA at that time, you know, in the very late 60s, was the music was everywhere, and the music was music and movies were the most important cultural
that was the George Lucas days and that
stuff, right? I came in right at the tail end of that. I met George, like my first day in LA, I met George Lucas and all those guys who were just students. I mean, we were all just students at the same time. So it was a really heady, exciting time. And then music really became the central part of my life. You know, it was interesting. I was thinking about it and preparing for talking to you about it today, because I hadn't thought about it in a while. But even though I was taking business classes and I got a degree in business, it was like there was no choice at the end of college. I was going to play music for a living. And
so you went out on the streets, on the road, in the theaters.
Well, yeah, and what
for
happened
15
was
years, right?
I started playing, and I played for a living for about 15 years. But what got me going was I did some demos when I was just out of college, or right at the end of college. And I was very lucky that I got to play them for a very important A&R guy. And he said to me, he said, I think you've got it, but you have to go on the road and play 1,000 gigs.
Jeez.
You got to get out there and do it. Because I was just a kid out of
the
college.
Beatles did. Why wouldn't you?
Everybody that really is great. That's what they did. And I took it to heart. I really did. So I went to San Francisco, and in those days, you could actually make a living playing music ad hoc, either on the street or in little clubs or whatever. So I ended up starting on the street, and then playing in clubs, and it ended up that I've done basically any kind of gig you can imagine, from the street to 10,000 seat.
So arenas. How did you work your way up so you were opening for some of the big acts?
Well, I'll tell you something. It really was organic. It's like I see people out there doing music now for a living, and the difficulty now is making a living and not having to do something else. So I was very lucky because at that time, it was very inexpensive to live, first of all. I mean, a flat in San Francisco, we had a beautiful flat in San Francisco for $240 a month.
Nice.
So, you could make a living and play nothing, do nothing but play music. And so I think that's really why my road kind of went the way it was, because I played music 5 nights a week wherever I lived. We lived in the Bay Area, then we lived back in Massachusetts, in Florida, all over the place. And one thing led to another. I would have duos and trios, and I'd play by myself. Then I had a 7-piece rock and roll band, and we opened for everybody in the Bay Area. And then I came to LA. At a certain point, I'd played every club and every gig in the Bay Area. And we came to LA, and I got very lucky, and I was in the right place at the right time. And I got to go out and start doing opening act gigs for these big acts. And I found myself going from playing a little club of 100 people to playing, really a 5,000 seater.
Yeah.
And then I did a whole bunch of those arena gigs, being the opening act all by myself. And,
Kind of a dream, isn't it? I mean,
it was
really,
it was amazing. It was
yeah,
amazing,
yeah.
and it was a challenge because I was unknown and people hadn't heard my songs, and
Yeah.
they had paid to see somebody else.
Yeah.
So you had to get out there and make it
Well,
happen.
we did a conference together a while ago about art in hard times and how, artists, whether you're a writer or a painter or a musician, it's always kind of hard times.
Yeah.
But particularly now, I mean, in the music business, things have changed so much. There's so much commercial pressure and stuff. So you gave us a little opening riff from your song "Art in Hard
That's
Times,"
right.
which kind of talks about that. But I'd love to hear you
I'll
sing
play
it.
that song, and you had that intentional conversation conference, and you put a call out for people to write a paragraph or write a sentence
Yeah.
about art in hard times, and I thought, well, I don't want to write a sentence, I want to write a song, and that's really where this started. So. Oh, the noise is deafening. Politics, money, and war. I need a refuge, place to even the score. So turn off the NPR and the pundits on TV. Log off the blogosphere. Find a little space to feel free. And make some art in hard times, art in hard times, art in hard times. Everybody I talk to is all shook up. The future's there. All the indicators look rough as the ice caps melt and the wildfires blaze. Is there no reward for making something that won't fade? Now make some art in hard times, art in hard times, art in hard times. Squeeze some paint, tune up the guitar before it's too late. Put your fingers on the keyboard, focus your lens, take a deep breath. And make some art in hard times, art in hard times, art in hard times. Go make some art in hard times, art in hard times, art in hard times.
So that's art in hard times.
Yeah.
Always hard times in art. So, I'm thinking as you're playing, you really draw inspiration from stuff that's going on in your life, right?
Absolutely.
And that's kind of the material. Well, where we left off is you were doing opening acts, you were playing big theaters, and things are going good in the music business. But then you got an interesting opportunity to get into the feature film business with a deal at 20th Century Fox.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing about my whole career when you asked about how did things happen.
Yeah.
Showing up, as they always say, is a big part of it. And,
Yeah.
one of the things that became obvious, and going forward it was the same thing, was that everything that I did kind of added to whatever was going to come next. So the fact that I went to film school kind of was put way on the back burner for a long time. And then a friend of mine was working with a producer, and they were looking for projects.
Right.
And they had a deal at 20th Century Fox, and it was kind of an interesting deal, the way things were working out. And so I got the opportunity to pitch this original idea that I had.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I mean, talk about being a lucky rookie.
Yeah.
I pitched the idea to the producer. She liked it very much. And then we took it to the studio, and lo and behold, I got a deal.
Nice.
So, I found myself, it was kind of at the right transition because,
Yeah.
as you can tell, I'm doing acoustic music, and even the kind of the style of music I was doing, even when it was electric, when I came down to LA, which was about 1979, 1980, you know, the style of music was beginning to change. It was power pop and metal and all kinds, and punk rock and all that.
Yeah.
And so what I was doing was not quite in style. So
Right.
it was actually a good transition point for me to go from a performing musician to something else, and that something else turned out to be screenwriting. So
Yeah.
I actually was at 20th Century Fox for a couple of years, and as you know, as a screenwriter,
Yeah.
the good news was I got a deal. The good news was they paid me.
Pay you a check.
The bad news was they didn't make the movie.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing experience. I
Yeah.
met some incredible people.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing some rewriting on some other projects. And
Right.
I was in that world.
Sure.
I had an office on the lot, and it was pretty amazing to go from playing gigs to suddenly driving onto the lot.
Yeah.
And
Well, I take it you're doing music the whole time still.
well, interestingly enough, the project had music associated with it. So
Right.
if they'd made the movie, they had signed me for a deal
Yeah.
to do the music as well. That was, again, the transition was the two things went together.
Right.
And
Well, so you as a screenwriter, yeah, I know the deal there. It's a nice paycheck, but sometimes you end up in development hell. And you're
Exactly.
pitching and you're pitching and you're pitching.
Exactly.
And I take it that's kind of what happened to you. At a certain
exactly,
point.
that's exactly what happened to
Yeah.
me. And so I ended up going to many, many meetings, doing a lot of pitches.
Right.
And they never say no. They don't like to say no in the room.
Oh, I know. They kill you with yes.
They kill you with yes. And being a musician, when I was a performer, I could always make a living. In those days, I could
Yeah.
always make a living. I could go out and play, whether it was
Yeah.
by myself or with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But as a screenwriter, you have to get somebody to hire you.
Oh, yeah.
Or else you're writing on spec, as we know.
Right.
And spec doesn't pay the bills. So
Yeah.
I got to the point where people were, I had presidents of major companies shake my hand and tell me I had a deal,
Yeah.
and I would never hear from them again. So
Right.
that got old, and
Yeah.
I thought to myself, now I really need to do something completely different. I need
Yeah.
to get, it was time to really transition to something else. And once again, some friends of mine had a business, professional film processing lab of all things, adjacent to the entertainment business.
Yeah, yeah.
And they needed somebody to run it. And of course, I had a business degree, so I had, there was
Sure.
something there, and they,
Yeah.
we knew each other very well. So I ended up going into that business, and oddly enough, I got into it in the late 80s, and that was the very beginning of the transition from analog photography to digital
Right,
photography.
right.
So it was just complete fortune. Chance and coincidence is really the kind of things that I've found in my life
Yeah.
have been huge parts of my life.
Yeah.
And in this case, that's exactly what happened. So I ended up running this film processing lab for a while and interacting with some of the best photographers in the world
Right.
and learning about the digital transition, which had already started happening in music. I knew musicians who were starting to use synthesizers
Sure.
at that time, so
Yeah.
it made a lot of sense to me. So at the end of a short period of time, I ended up starting my first company, first of several companies, and we were one of the first digital imaging bureaus in Los Angeles. Called
So you
Z6 Visual
were kind of on the wave of the music and the wave of the film in the,
Very
in the
much
80s,
so.
and then the wave of technology
Very much
went
so.
into the 80s and the 90s.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
I found out that a lot of musicians were very good at technology.
Yeah.
It's
Interesting.
amazing how the two things went along together.
Huh.
And because I had no background, I had nothing to lose, I just jumped right into the digital change. And so we opened this company, Z6 Visual Systems in Hollywood, and we ended up working with some of the top newspapers and magazines and publishers and
Yeah.
photographers in the world. And we were the cutting edge, really, of digital imaging in Los Angeles. And then I ended up going out and being an evangelist for digital imaging,
Right.
which led me to speaking engagements in front of, again, big crowds. So I
Yeah.
was back performing.
Performance.
But performing, there's a joke about dancing about architecture, but I
Yeah.
was singing about digital imaging, basically.
How cool. Well, you also were writing music about it, too.
Well-
And one of your pieces is kind of about, the that aha moment, I guess it is.
Exactly.
Where in technology or in art or whatever it is, and where you kind of have an epiphany and you see it now, which
That's
is
right.
the name of the song,
That's right. Exactly. So, and this one I think is one of the few songs written about scientists, explorers, and ingenious musicians all in one song.
Okay.
Einstein, he worked on that theory, yeah. For 30 years he tried to unify He had a big mind in a hurry, 10,000 tried. And someday we're all gonna find out. Someday we'll know the who and the why. Someday we will all know better. I see it now. I see it now. Magellan, he sailed out of that harbor, took a chance that the world was round, disappeared over that new horizon. Look what he found. And someday we're all gonna find out, yeah. Someday we'll know the who and the why, yeah. Someday we will all know better. I see it now. I see it now. Coltrane strolled down Broadway, yeah, blowing his favorite sheets of sound. Took those giant steps out into the blue, expressing impressions just like dreams come true. And someday we're all gonna find out. Someday we'll know the who and the why, yeah. Someday we will all know better. I see it now. I see it now. Think fast, another change is coming. Heads up, you better look around, yeah. In your world, all those shapes are shifting. What's up is down. And someday we're all gonna find out. Someday we'll know the who and the why. Someday we will all know better. I see it now. I see it now. I see it. I see it. I see it now.
That's I See It Now by Bob Goldstein. That's terrific, Bob. So as you work, do you kind of work from an idea? Do you work from a lyric that you hear, a little bit of a riff? I mean, how do you come to it? Kind of depends.
Yeah. All of the above. You know, I think like most guitar playing songwriters, you know, you sit around and play a lot.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
You know, you hear this all the time, and I'm certainly one of those people. Like, for example, that song. I came up with that lick. Right? That was the first thing, and I thought, well, I like that. What is that? Where does that go? And that just comes from noodling and playing, and then you kind of play it over and over again. And then I keep notebooks. You know, things are always occurring to me, and I'll read something or I'll think of something and I'll write it down. Yeah. And sometimes it'll all come at once, and sometimes it's on a long delay. Yeah. And some songs, like I know we're going to do one a little bit later, that it becomes like a Zen exercise. Like, for example, I came up with this one song which is about a friend of mine that you've heard, and who passed away. And the story of the song is actually the story of what actually happened. I got a phone call, and so in that case, that song was based on the fact that I wanted to write something for my friend, about my friend. So, and I thought, well, I'm going to write exactly what happened, which is I got this phone call, which is very dramatic, and we kind of went from there. And in that case, I had the music and I had a little bit of lyrics. And I ended up writing the rest of the lyrics walking my dog. Because I had it in my mind what I wanted to say, and I had the basic structure like I have of that song I just played you. And so I could play it over and over in my head and walk and think, and I keep a notebook. And literally I wrote the song
Nice.
walking the dog.
Yeah.
So it happens every different way. Most songwriters will
Well,
tell
you
that.
know, you talked about how you've done everything from street corners to 10,000 seat theaters. You've also talked about working with bands, doing solo, different genres. I mean, talk a little bit about, you know, your evolution and the evolution of music as it's gone along in your
Right.
in your work.
Well, you know, when I started out, it was part of what they call the folk scare
Yeah.
of that time. You know, and the Kingston Trio were big.
Yeah.
And the great thing for kids like me that got turned on to folk music through the Kingston Trio, and,
Yeah.
and I've talked to so many people about this, people that are very well-known musicians that I would open with or whatever,
Yeah.
and many of us had that in common. We first, Lindsey Buckingham is a good example, actually,
Right.
of people that talk about the Kingston Trio as being the thing that got them into music.
Right.
And then from there, we went to the roots musicians. So they would play a song, or they'd have a banjo on,
Right.
on the album,
Yeah.
and you go, well, who's the great banjo player? And so
Right.
you'd hear Earl Scruggs or, you know,
Yeah.
Roger Sprung.
Yeah.
And so I ended up playing bluegrass music when I was a kid. So I played folk and bluegrass.
Okay.
And everybody was experimenting. So I mean, I played bass, I played guitar, I played banjo. Banjo was one of my first instruments.
Right.
And then of course, like everybody, the Beatles came.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know, many of us traded our acoustic instruments for electric guitars.
Right.
And so I was part of really a whole movement of people where music was the center of our social activities and what
Right.
we did with each other. You know, we
Right.
played sports and then we played music.
Yeah.
And so I had that from a young age, playing acoustic music and playing electric music.
Yeah.
And then because I was interested in all those things, you know, then when you're playing gigs for a living, then opportunities come up.
Right,
So somebody will say,
right.
well, do you want to play this gig? And you know, the rule is if you can play it, don't say no. If it's a good band, if the people are good players,
Sure.
no matter what kind of music it is, go for it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I ended up doing that throughout my career. You know, so if it was a gig where it was the electric band gig, man, we get the amps out and we're
so,
gone.
but I mean, the good news is there you get a lot of experience with different genres.
Absolutely.
You get, you know,
Absolutely. I mean, I had in San Francisco, I had a rock and roll band at the same time that I had a little country rock trio with a fiddle.
Right.
So we'd play Orange Blossom Special one night, and the next night, you know, we're playing, you know, full out rock and roll. And
Is there? Well, where have you come around? Is it sort of full circle now, or?
well, you know, I'll tell you, the interesting thing in terms of my career was it did come around full circle
Yeah.
because although I played all these different combinations, I had a lot of duos. I did a lot of duo work, which was great.
Right.
But when it came down to really doing the big gigs and going out on the road and doing that, because of the economics of the situation, the way to do it was to do it by myself. So I came all the way around. In fact, people, the guys that were in my band came to one of my first big gigs in San Francisco, and it was like a 5,000-seater. And they had seen me from the time that I was had been playing on the street all the way to there.
Yeah, yeah.
And they said, well, you know, you're doing the same act that you were doing on the street, but here you are. And that was kind of an existential moment because, you know, it's like you're a person. When you do what I do, when you do this thing,
Yeah.
you're just a person with a guitar, and they put you different places, or you end up in different places.
No, really.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's the way, though.
Exactly, that's
Yeah,
the way.
yeah,
And so so there it's very stark because
Yeah.
you're standing there all by yourself, and you were standing there all by yourself on a street corner, you know, not that
And this
long
time there's
before
10,000.
that. But one thing you learn on the street that I think most successful, especially in those days, you know, we played at places like the Cannery where we weren't necessarily having to stand on the street, but we were in an outdoor situation.
Yeah.
And you learn that the only people that stopped to listen, or the only people that were there, were listening because there was a reason to listen. So you learn quickly, not only like an opening act, how to get people's attention and keep it.
Well, you know, talking about the evolution of music, you've written a song that kind of called "Eyes Wide Open."
Right.
They kind of sort of follows that, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, this is.
Can we hear a little bit of that?
Exactly. This is my little sort of history in a way, of country rock. So I'll just set it up because it has 3 verses, and the first one is about Hank Williams. The second one is about Graham Parsons, who many people kind of point to as being the bridge between country and rock. And then the third, of course, is Keith Richards, and he's a bridge.
Go for it.
From and to many places. T-Tot showed him long time ago, fine way of living, anything you need to know. He learned those lessons, learned them right. They took him to the top, then they took his life. Have you got your eyes wide open, you see what you want to see. Have you got your eyes wide open, looking for a path that's free? Have you got your eyes wide open? Hey, you see what you want to see. Find a path that's free. White nudie suit, sunburst guitar, high heel boots, every inch a star. Out in the desert, neath the Joshua tree, flames in the night, a new eternity. Have you got your eyes wide open? Do you see what you want to see? Have you got your eyes wide open, looking for a path that's free? Have you got your eyes wide open? Hey, you see what you want to see. Find a path that's free. Last man standing, prowling the stage, silver skull ring flashing, pirate gypsy sage, jagged chords ring out, ancient band sways, the ritual plays out, and lives another day. Have you got your eyes wide open? Hey, you see what you want to see. Have you got your eyes wide open? Oh, looking for a path that's free. Have you got your eyes wide open? Hey, you see what you want to see. Find a path that's free. Find a path that's free. Find a path that's free.
Hey, Bob, thank you. Eyes wide open. It's been a pleasure. We're going to pick up another segment if you can stick around.
Absolutely.
And, you know, one of the things I want to talk about is a lot of the work you've been doing in the first segment here is about your professional life and all that. But I know that you also write some stuff that's kind of from the heart in terms of what's happened to you in your life and personal experiences.
That's right.
So I'd love to delve into that a little bit more. And maybe we'll hear a little bit more about all the intersection of technology, film writing.
Absolutely.
And maybe your dog, too. I know you're a dog man. Thank you, Bob. We'll see you in a minute.